Hello. My name is Insane Raven, and I am back with another episode of 100 Days of Halloween, the daily podcast where we go ahead and watch a horror movie that we haven't seen before, come on back, and talk about it every single day up to Halloween. That's right. So today I am back with today's episode, and the word today has no meaning. I've been doing this for 4 days in a row, and my brain has already melted. But today we decided to watch the movie Dark Tide. It's a movie from 1961, and is easily the oldest movie I've ever seen. Before this, I think that movie would have been Angels with Dirty Faces, like classic gangster film, black and white gangster film. But I really enjoyed this movie actually. Like, I was kind of surprised, especially within the first 10 minutes. I'm like, oh wow, I hate this character we have in Johnny, who I lovingly called Sailor Boy pretty much every time he was on screen. I was like, hey, it's Sailor Boy. No, but the whole movie is more or less this mystery, this thriller, this what's gonna happen next type of movie. Taking place in the 60s, Johnny Boy, Sailor Boy, pretty much comes off the boat for his day of leave in the military, like his off day essentially. Liberty, that's what they called it. For his day of liberty, and he's hanging out having a wonderful time by himself. Like, he is giving himself some self-care because he is going to like a fair. He's getting like photo booth stuff taken of himself. Like, he's having a whale of a time doing this, and his night ends up like most nights, I would imagine, when you're pressed sailor uniform and you don't have anything else to do, at a bar. And he starts drinking up, and he's like, okay, I need to pick a space to sit. So he sits right next to the drum set that is just like going away in this dingy bar, which somehow managed to book a live band with just a flute player losing his mind in a solo. Like, you think that heavy metal concerts have rockin' solos? No. You need to go see the Dark Tide in the middle of a dingy bar, this band playing, because that man will blow on your flute. And it's gonna be a wonderful time. Like, he's genuinely busting out, killing it on this flute. Like, I've never heard a flute solo in a band and be like, hell yeah, give me more flute, please. And Johnny Boy, Sailor Boy, oh my god, that's such a basic name, is sitting there and he's staring at this woman across the bar. And kind of this, like, hey. Like, if that was to happen now, you'd be like, oh, someone watch her drinks, please. Especially when he gets up and joins her, because he's like, yeah, I can't see the band from where I'm sitting, because I'm sitting behind the band for some reason. Do you mind if I sit here? And she's like, yeah, sure, I don't care. I'm listening to the band. And he's like, well, great. Well, what's your name? Do you like the band? And he starts asking like 20 questions. Like, his whole point is to be there and be like, I'm here to smash. And she's like, I'm listening to the dude bust the flute. Mr. Bust the Flute. And he's just having a good time. And he keeps going. She goes, I'd like to listen to the music. Like, she is awesome. Like, not putting up with this shit. And he's like, oh, okay. And then at some point she leaves and he follows her, which is just, why? I mean, 1960s, I guess it makes sense. And she's like, well, I just really want to go home. He goes, well, let me walk you for a while. You know, it's nighttime. You really shouldn't be out at night. And if this movie was made today, he's like, oh, you're the killer. Like, you're the killer. You're the red herring. 100% going off. But it's not now. It's 60 years before. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going to happen. But this woman, Maura, as we've learned at this point, is like 100% being like, no, about all of it. And it's like, all right, good for her. And then she's like, you know what? I'm tired of hearing your voice. You can walk me home. That's fine. You get there. He's like, well, aren't you going to invite me in? He goes, and me and Mora both kind of like look at him in this way of like, what do you want you here to begin with? What do you mean let you in? Which is just terrifying. And then he's like, oh, well, I guess I thought I could just come in for a while. A little while. He's like, no, you cannot. So she pushes past them and he grabs her by the shoulders and just kisses her. She's like, if this was a music video, this should be like the type of kiss where like the dude should be holding her face and be like, this is love and passion or whatever. But it's just very creepy and awkward because like Mora has not been into it this entire time. So it's just like, ugh, yikes. But then apparently she just likes to be roughed up because it's the 60s. And she's like, you know, how about you come back tomorrow and I'll make you some eggs. I'll make you some breakfast because you suck your tongue down my throat and I didn't want it there. I'll make you some breakfast. You want breakfast? And she makes this face. And I'm like, you're gonna kill him. You're gonna kill him, ain't ya? The eggs are gonna be poisoned. You're gonna kill him. And I was very excited for this. Not only because I, in 2022, am making like a Last Apothecary reference, which if you haven't read that book, let me just pause the whole movie podcast for a quick second because this is a great book that I think that everyone should read. The Last Apothecary by Sarah Penner. Go read that. That's some good books. Good books. Anyway, so no, surprisingly, she doesn't murder him with eggs or anything. And they just have like a lovely breakfast. And then Sailor Boy opens up his mouth again. And you're like, dude, you're already winning. Stop talking. You somehow got into the situation where this woman who doesn't know you, didn't want you around, has now offered her up like breakfast. Like nothing physical, no touching, just breakfast. He goes like, you're kind of winning and not getting sued or beat up. Like, stop while you're ahead, my guy. And he's like, well, what do you do? Like, what's your job? Because it's a Sunday. We find out. And there's quippy dialogue. He goes, what do you mean you have to work? It's a Sunday. Like, he doesn't believe that she has work on a Sunday. Again, probably she wouldn't have had work if she wasn't, you know, the attraction at the pier. And he's like, oh, okay. So you're the attraction. Are you a dancer? Because, I mean, even I was like, oh, is she a stripper? They're cool. Understood. And she's like, no, I don't do that. And then his next response is like, oh, so you get baseball throws at you. And already that's such a, like, what kind of answer? So it's like, oh, okay, so you're either pretty enough to stare at, or you're getting baseballs thrown at you. And, you know, I'm over here like, okay, he probably just means the dunk tanks. Because that's what I would assume. He's like, okay, well, if it's not that, the dunk tanks, you know, you still kind of get that whole visual appeal. I don't think they're going to be throwing baseballs at humans. Like, I don't think they'd go that far. That feels a bit dramatic. And then she responds, no, my job's not dangerous. And it's like, you were throwing baseballs at human beings, weren't you, Peel? And he's like, what the fuck? Like, the 60s were a wild time, you know? Like, first off, I do want to say, I really did love how this movie is in black and white because there are certain things that just pop up in black and white that don't pop up any other way. So light becomes really fun to play with. Like, both of the movies that I've really enjoyed have been playing with light. Like, I really enjoyed Seed. The Collector, there wasn't really a lot light going on, but Seed was really good. I liked The Collector, even though it wasn't what I was expecting. And now Dogtide is also kind of playing with light, having that fun. Because you eventually go off to her job, and she's like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm a mermaid. At my job, I sit in water. I put in an artificial fishtail because that's how she says it. She's like, no, it's an artificial fishtail. And I sit in it, and people just give me quarters to stare at me. And it's like, how much is a quarter from the 1960s? Which I'm actually going to Google that now. Because I've said that. I'm too curious to not say that. How much was a quarter? Yeah, we're just going in the 60s. Yeah, so she's making like $3.40 per person to just be stared at. And also, if a quarter equals $3.40, I don't want to hear a single person older than my generation, because I am an LCM, a last call millennial, older than a millennial being like, when I was your age, we made $2 an hour and we were happy. Because that was like, you had a fucking gold mine for flipping burgers. Like, nah, that's insane. Also, flipping burgers is a valid career. I did that for a little bit. It was fun, actually. So, that whole strangeness goes on. You see her in her tank at her job. And she's just like sitting underwater brushing her hair. And the way that it's shot, at least from my understanding, my perspective on it, was that she's literally underwater, just holding her breath, brushing her hair. And it's like, oh shit. Okay. That's really clever. She's an actual mermaid using like the glitz and the glam to be like, hey, I'm a mermaid. Give me money. That's kind of smart. I dig that. Also, it'd be a really cool way to like play on it, like, she's a mermaid. Kind of like tease that out a little bit. Because, I don't think anyone going to go see Dark Tide in the theaters back in the 1968, was actually like, I think she's going to be an actual mermaid. I don't think that was really the expectation going into the film. But, no, she's sitting in her tail, brushing her hair underwater, like holding her breath or something. And it's really cool. And then you skip forward a little bit. You skip forward past the staring at this woman in her tank. And before that, after he says that her job, I'm sorry, I was looking through my notes. After he brings up the fact that like, oh, maybe your job is getting beaten with baseballs like a normal human being. He then goes, I've always wanted something. And then proceeds to give his entire life story about how his dad abandoned him and his mom died. And he always wanted to see the world. So he joined the Navy. And he was like, and I hope one day I'll see the world. And I was like, man, that explains not being able to take no for an answer. But I do have a question. What's your question? And it's just fun. Because it's like, why? It's like that one friend, well, not even a friend, it's like that one acquaintance you have in a group of friends who like fully believes that you two are like besties because he has like social anxiety. So he's like, I've picked a person, you're my person, you're stuck with me person, and just starts telling you everything, and you're just staring at him like, I forgot your name. And it just becomes very awkward in total. So, yeah. That was fun. And then some stuff happens, and they end up going on like their third date. And these dates are happening basically once a week when he has liberty, because that's legitimately all the time he has. And we see him go on a bus. So he's like an out-of-towner, essentially, which kind of adds to the mystique. So he doesn't really know a lot of the things that happen in Venice, California, because he's an out-of-towner. On his third date, they start talking, like, goes to the beach. He, like, slams the rest of his beard down and looks at her and, like, with the most chipper, like, pep in his step, like, oh boy, type level. He goes, well, good night, and just, like, puts his arm down and go to bed on the beach. And I'm like, good sir, you were going to get so sunburnt? Like, I don't think there's any sunscreen on your back. Also, you just had a whole, like, you slammed a whole beer. Who are you, me? What is this affecting? Why are you doing this to me? Let me have my alcohol in peace. Anyway, enough about me. It was just a weird transition that I like got way too much joy out of. It was like, oh, now we're on the bus. Oh, now I'm drinking beer. Now I'm going to bed. It's like, what? Why? But that's fun. So all that kind of goes down, and then she starts talking about how she loves nature, and she loves the ocean, and she loves not the ocean. She loves the sun and the moon and the stars and the wind and kind of the ocean, but she's also afraid of it. And then Johnny Boy comes up with this line: I guess we all feel what we love. Freaking brilliant, Johnny. Just like, yeah. And then they start making out with each other like normally, and I'm like, oh, okay. I guess we're playing the long haul on this one. Well, I should rewind and say making out is according to the standards of 1968. You know, those making out. It's like, oh, okay, that's a thing. And then like they basically start saying I love you to each other, but not really saying it. Like they're saying it in that Disney Channel way where like they're just staring in each other's souls and being like, I feel things. And you're like, ooh, he feels things. He goes, but I can't say that. And it just becomes that very like awkward, like cameras holding, we're staring into each other's soul, destiny things for too long. So all that that whole beach scene goes down, and you know you start getting like a couple of like cuts from a little of other dates they will go on or whatever. Like they go to like a bar, they're sitting on a table, and they see the woman in black show up. And the woman in black has basically been this character who showed up one other time in the bar where they first met. No, at the beach. It's the second time they see him. But the first time is at the bar where they met. And they start like Moira and this woman in black talk to each other, and then in like some foreign language. It's not a language that we understand. It's not a like. God, let me rephrase. It's not a language that I understand. It's most likely just like some European language like Greek or French, and I just don't know it. And because it was in the 60s, you could do that and basically like, oh, that might as well be an alien language. She freaks out, runs away. At the beach, she sees this guy again and ends up following her. Moira kind of disappears. And there's another scene. No. There's another scene where they go down. I totally forgot about the scene. Where they go down, where Moira's like off at work or something, and Johnny Boy is just like hanging out at her house. But she lives above a merry-go-round, so she's at the merry-go-round, and he's kind of just talking with the owner of the merry-go-round, Ellen, his daughter, and then this fortune teller. But we don't know she's a fortune teller yet. We just get the idea that she's a mystic. And they're all kind of talking, and Ellen's like, well, if you're going to continue to date Moira, you should probably know that her past two boyfriends got the big murdered. And she was like, what do you mean? Like, do you think that Moira has something to do with it? And the psychic jumps in and goes, we don't know that. There's no way to say that that's what happened. That's just conjecture. Yada, 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 yada. And I'm sitting here watching this. It's like, wait, so the mystic is the skeptic? The chick talking about, like, reading your tea leaves for your future is the one like, we don't know. Like that. I don't know. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that way more than I thought I would. So that whole scene kind of happened. You find out that Ellen is kind of like crushing hardcore on Johnny Boy, not knowing that he sticks his tongue down people's throats without saying yes or no. That's a whole thing that goes on. And then they kind of like move on. It's like, oh, okay, so now we have like the second seed of mystery has been plotted. That kind of goes on for a little bit. He sees the woman in black again after he gets a phone call calling for the sailor, but no one knows that he's there. He follows the mystery woman around all the way to Moira's dad's house. A man named Captain Murdoch. That's what it was. Captain Murdoch basically is like, hey, I've been wanting to talk to you. I've heard you've been seeing Mora. You've been hanging around Mora. And just starts like pumping alcohol down his face. And even Johnny's like, man, you really hit that stuff hard. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay. You know what we're talking about. All that kind of goes on. And he's like, you need to not. Ellen has kind of already started the seed of being like, you're in danger, you need to leave Mora. Now, her dad, Captain Murdoch, is now saying the same thing. He starts going on about how it's like, you need to be careful. You know, I think she might be a siren. I found her on the islands. She might be a siren. I didn't know what she'd become. And every now and then she kind of just gets these compulsions to do things. And I'm worried that those things might be a danger to your health. And it's just a really interesting kind of thing to put in there. Like the kind of psychological element of this whole thing. Because at this point, there really hasn't been anything too scary. Like this scary. It's very much more of a mystery thriller than a horror movie. And at this point, we're like 40-ish minutes into the movie. And you've just now learned that there's a mystery to solve. And that's, you know, and on one hand, I kind of enjoy that. I kind of enjoy not knowing that something was going on, you know, because it's a movie. Obviously, something is going on. And, you know, we have the kind of like seeds of mystery and intrigue with the mermaids and the mystery witch woman in black who's walking around, who let us heal, who, when we asked Captain Murdoch, hey, what was up with that? He's like, I've never seen a woman in my life. I've never seen your woman in my life, which is, you know, not exactly comforting. So all that kind of goes on. I was like, oh, okay. So your daughter's a killer and might have killed those two men. That's cool. And he just completely ignores it anyway. Which is, you know, I guess that's a choice. So he goes back up to his. They meet up again, and Moira is in the bath, and he falls asleep on the couch, has terrible nightmares, and if you start having nightmares of like octopuses crawling all over your faces, then you should probably stop seeing the woman absolutely obsessed with Ocean, like just as a general health thing. It might not be a good idea. When he wakes up, he's like fighting this octopus off of his face, sees that she has left and has followed her bath footprints, because it's the 60s, all the way down to the beach, because that's how much water she was wearing? Drenched in. So that's just a whole thing. All that kind of goes on. And then he ends up finding her by yelling her name, and she's sitting underneath the docks. Not sitting, like she's standing up underneath the docks, her back pressed against the pier, and she's just screaming his name. It's super, like, it's a really intense moment. And at this point, what's just kind of like building up there is the first time where that release happens. And super, like, I'm imagining for the time, it's terrifying. And she picks up the dude and like scares him back. And everyone's back at Moira's house. And when everyone, I just mean Johnny Boy and Moira, because there are no other characters in this movie for real. Except for Ellen. Ellen's also there. But that goes on. They're kind of just talking. He's like, I'm gonna let you go to sleep now. And he passes out on the floor. And he's like, okay. Did someone lock the door? Because Moira is convinced that she has essentially been called by the sea people, the sirens, and she's being summoned back, right? And she's like, I'm scared to be by myself, I'm scared to go near the ocean, I'm scared to do all this stuff, Next day it comes on, and skipping ahead, next day it comes back, they're sitting down and, like, just hanging out, existing. She's cleaning, like, diving equipment, which is like, how much was diving equipment back then? And Johnny Boy's just reading a book, and she goes, I think what I want to do in regards to yesterday, in regards to my grief and my trauma, is I want to just forget it. I want to forget it. I want to move on. And Johnny's like, yeah, that's what I've been telling you to do. I've been telling you to forget that whole thing ever happened. Repress it. Conceal. Don't feel. You don't need to know anything. And she's like, yeah, I think that's great. Want to go diving with me? What? Tomorrow, want to go diving with me? In the water. The moon tide's going to be great. It's going to be a full moon. We can go to underwater. I know a spot. A diving spot. And at this point, I'm like, oh, it's about to get good. So it goes down there, and they go into this really expansive underwater shot of Moira and Johnny just swimming with the water. And I don't know how technical that of a shot that would have been back in 1968, but I was impressed that they got it done in 1968. I was like, that's freaking cool. Like, I don't know if this is like a common thing, but I was really enjoying the fact that they had underwater shots in a movie almost 60 years old. That's freaking cool to me. And Moira gets stuck. Like, she puts her hand in something she's not supposed to be putting her hand in. And, like, she gets stuck in it. And before she gets out, she calls over Johnny. He puts, like, both of his arms in and try to get him out. She comes out and cuts his breathing tubes. And I'm like, oh, fuck, she is the killer. And there's a whole, like, struggle scene underwater. And they're, like, fighting to, like, die, essentially. She's ripping off his face mask on oxygen tank, has cut his lines, and he's just panicking, going up all the way up to the top until he gets up in the boat, flops down, and I'm like, you have the bends. That freaking Manamadan taught me you're about to die. You are gonna die because you got the bends, and you drink, so you're definitely gonna die. That's how my brain works now. And instead, like, he bundles up in a jacket and just sits in his boat for, I'm assuming, a whole day. I'm assuming, like, at least a whole day before he gets moving. Moira just keeps swimming underwater, and we don't see her again for the rest of the movie. Like, there's, like, a good 20 odd minutes left in this movie, and she's just gone. She's done. This movie, who was all about her and all about, the mystery of her, now no longer has her. And it's like, choices were made. So he goes back to the fairground to be like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. Sees Captain Murdoch there, still, like, hosting this mermaid thing. And he's like, oh, maybe she did come back. I know I stole her boat and basically marooned her in the open ocean, but maybe she did come back. And he goes back there, he pays his little fine, and he sees her, and it's a doll. And he's like, oh, shit, she died. And apparently he's the last customer there, which I do love that his whole disguise was a windbreaker and a hat. So very much already employed and enrolled in the MCU fashion disguise class. Nailed it. Captain Murdoch comes back and he's like, you fucking killed her. Except he doesn't say fucking. He's like, you killed her. And he starts screaming and ranting. And ends up, like, firing his gun like 6 times in the air. And super intense. At some point, somehow, the glass breaks. Water gushes everywhere. The mannequin, which is not a mannequin, it's supposed to be Moira, falls out on top of him and crushes Murdoch. But he's still alive. He's just knocked out. The cops come in and it's like, what the fuck's going on? And they look at him, and he's just like, oh, you got some explaining to do. We then go to the police station. It turns out that Captain Murdoch, the whole time, has been psychologically manipulating the shit out of his daughter because he's a lonely man. He picked her up essentially off the island, kind of insinuating bought her, but not really. It was like, I just figured that if I had a child, I would always be loved. And then I didn't account for the fact that she might need love in other ways because she had such a strong will. And that makes me kind of think, like, hold on. Hold on. Hold on, God. Hold on. You stole a child and forgot that they grow up. Bro, what? So that was a whole freaking thing. And he goes on to say, he was like, well, I was so consumed by my need to be the only one and my need to be this and that when other men came around, I killed them and I made her think that she did it. Perhaps I did it a bit too well, for she has accepted and adopted parts of the identity I have given her, and that's why she tried to kill you. And then he gets let off, like just off the prison, and I'm sitting here, it's like they 100% just did psychological like analysis and breakdowns and like the psychological development of a child in this 1968 film. I'm like, fuck yeah, because at the time, right, we look at Carl Jung and we look at the humanistic perspective and all the kind of like humanistic therapies that are out now. They were like, oh yeah, of course, if you want someone to get better, first treat them like a human first, and then you can kind of start working with them. That, like, breaking the norms of psychological research or anything like that, not even like discussing it really, because yes, it was popular, but it was popular in a way of like, hey, you're messed up because of your childhood type thing. We look at this movie in this scene where he's basically like, I created a false narrative for her to adopt so that I would never be lonely. And he's like, fuck, man. Like, damn. I really enjoyed the twist and the whole, like, everything about it, you know? So I hope you guys got to see this movie. I hope you guys got to see Dark Tide, Night Tide. I keep misnaming it. And one time I was calling it Night Wave. It was weird. But I absolutely loved this movie. Like, I was genuinely impressed with underwater shots and just really enjoyed the like psychological thriller of it all. I'm not 100% sure if I would have called it a horror movie, but it, you know, it definitely has the Halloween-esque of being like, hey, well, you know, there's mysteries, murder, and you know some little girl wants to dress up as a mermaid this Halloween. So you know what? It counts, and I'm counting it. But it does end with a shot of Johnny the Sailor Boy climbing back into a van, going back to his military base, and it ends with an Edgar Allan quote plastered on the screen. And so, all the night tide, I lay down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre? I don't know, because autocorrect changed that. There by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. So the theory is essentially that Moira just couldn't live with the fact that she tried to kill Johnny, despite believing that she had most likely killed the other two guys that she had been dating, swims out into open ocean and just is never seen again, essentially. Until like her body's dug up for the casket reveal later on, and everyone just kind of goes on their own way, and it's so like, oh, I don't know. I wish we would have gotten into something a bit more satisfying for Moira, but that's how it is. But tomorrow's movie is one I'm really excited about because it's going to finally be, I think, like the slasher flick I've been waiting to see. I thought The Collective was going to be that until I found out that it was basically directed and written by the Saw writers, 4, 5, and 6. The Saw writers had their hands in The Collective. So tomorrow I'm trying it again. But with the Netflix film, There's Someone in Your House. It looks to be a teen drama. Let me just read you the description really quick. Okay. Makani and her friends at Osborne High School try to identify and stop a mass killer who's targeting students and exposing their biggest secrets. So, it does seem a bit generic by the description, but it's on Netflix. it seems very like neo slasher horror film, which is exciting. So we'll watch that tomorrow. Again, it looks like another movie that the color is gonna blow my freaking brains out, but this will be fun. We're gonna have a good time. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.